Alright, so this video is to go over EMI 402 and 403 standards, and these are our analysis. So the first one is going to be EMI 402. So, the first thing you do, you won't finish the test if you read the passage, so we go straight to the scientist questions. Which of the following is a key assumption critical to the viewpoint of scientist 1? Critical means important to, and we're going to look at scientist 1. Then, so the first thing is read the question. Now I'm going to go through the answer choices and I'm going to highlight the key terms. Theropods, so that's a key term here, were nocturnal. Claws are unimportant. All modern flying birds. And Archaeopteryx was the first specimen to display the evolution of feathers. Now I have no idea what scientist 1 says, so none of these make any sense to me right now. So now I'm going to go back to the passage. So go back to scientist in question and see what they say. The ancestors of birds were small tree-dwelling theropods that evolved flight by leaping and gliding between treetops. Fossil records show that the Archaeopteryx, the oldest known, had large curved claws suited for perching on tree branches, had lightweight skeletons, feather configurations. Microraptor, another theropod, possessed wing feathers similar to those of modern birds that produced. Microraptor also had long legs and tail feathers, which would have severely interfered with the ground-based running. Okay, so which of the following is a key assumption critical to the opinion of scientist 1? Theropods were nocturnal. This passage says nothing about that. We're talking about the development of birds, so nocturnal is not mentioned. Theropod claws were unimportant in the evolution of flight. All modern flying birds descended from theropods, and Archaeopteryx was the first specimen to display the evolution of feathers. So we don't talk about Archaeopteryx having these, so they're not assuming that, because this one is perching on tree branches. Microraptor, another theropod relative, possess wing feathers similar to that of modern birds. So all modern birds descended from theropods. So the answer for this one is going to be C. I outlined that horribly, because we're talking about theropods the whole time, and if birds didn't come from theropods, then this didn't matter. So this one would be matching KT's. Alright, scientist 2's theory contains the basic assumption that theropod feet were adapted to grope tree branches. I already know from reading the first passage that that is from scientist 1. Theropod wingspans could not produce enough list. Archaeopteryx could run, Archaeopteryx could glide. So, birds evolved from ground-dwelling rather than tree-dwelling theropods. Evolving flight from the treetops, Archaeopteryx used their wings to produce thrust while running on the ground, so we're not going to leave out C yet. The propulsion generated their hind legs, and then they became airborne. So we're not going to talk about climbing because it says they're ground, not tree dwelling. So right now we're here between B and C. So let's see. Thrust producing. Okay, so for this one, hind legs in a manner for climbing as well as running. Great, but that doesn't really help us with this. So in order for them to actually run and become airborne, they have to be good at it. So the answer to that one is C. All right, number 3. Which of the following assumptions does scientist 2 make in his theory of flight evolution? Theropods and modern birds share similar skeletons. Similar way, so I'm not going to cross that off. Theropods could not balance on tree branches. Doesn't say that. Theropod skeletons were lightweight to increase blood flow in their limbs. And theropod legs were long to allow for quick paces. We don't see any of those words in scientist 2. So the answer to number 3 is then going to be A, because that's going to match. So new birds and old birds have to have similar skeletons for any of this to matter. All right, and number 4. Which of the following assumptions does scientist 2 make regarding the evolution of flight? So again, we're at scientist 2, so I'm only going to be looking at scientist 2, that particular passage. So, incorporating wing motions was necessary to escape predators. Incorporating wing motions increased ground speed. Archaeopteryx feathers were short, which helped decrease air resistance, and Archaeopteryx feathers enhances overall wingspan. So we don't really talk about feathers in this passage at all, so I'm going to go ahead and cross out C and D. So now I need to know about wing motion. Now, the general gist of this paragraph here, if I make a note, is that running speed went up, so the birds went up in the air. So why would that matter? So if we were running birds and we look at this, that means that they would run on the ground and they used their wings to produce thrust. So that assumption is that wing motion helped them there. So thrust and ground speed, that's where you match in that question. So the answer to 4 is B. Number 5. Which of the following assumptions does scientist 1, so now we're back to scientist 1 for the first time, make about Microraptor? Microraptor, and we're going to find him in the passage. So the things that we can note from the passage right there, so it has feathers that produce lift, long legs. Okay, Microraptor's running speed was insufficient for flight to occur. Long legs increased its running speed, but it says severely interfered, so I can go ahead and cross out B, because that's the exact opposite. Not a relative of the Archaeopteryx. That's not stated. Feathers were not necessary for flight, and we know that feathers produced lift if you looked at the 3 key terms that we wrote down. So that means that the answer has to be A. So running speed was insufficient for flight. And this one talks about having interference in ground-based running. So it's just matching the meaning.